always listens to and advocates for the citizens. Today, President Jones will be joined by other voices who will speak on matters that are important to the Black community. Our other co-host is the Honorable Judge Greg Mathis, who is Detroit born and Detroit raised. He is a retired 36th District Court judge who has turned arbiter of the daytime Emmy award-winning syndicated reality courtroom show, Judge Mathis. He is the second longest serving television arbitrator ever, only behind Judge Judy. But I gotta tell you this, folks, I'm Detroit born and raised. Nobody is behind Greg Mathis. I'm sorry, Judge Judy, Greg Mathis just stepped in front of you. But he may pass her when she retires. We're all gonna go for that. Rounding out our first panel is Miss Charity Dean. Hi, Charity. Charity is the director of the city's Civil Rights, Inclusion, and Opportunity Department, better known as CRIO. Charity has been the lead this week for what is called Conversations for the Culture. These are daily events this week as we prepare to celebrate Juneteenth. And we truly do have good ground in Detroit because our moderator, the beautiful and talented Lauren Saunders, was raised in the historic African-American neighborhood known as the Gardens, Conyers Gardens. She is probably best known as the former weekend anchor on WDIV Channel 4 for over 15 years. Since then, she has launched the Elevate Project and serves as a host and moderator for various events. And without further ado, Lauren Sanders, the floor is yours.
All right, Stephen, Grady, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone. We have 14 big brains on tap today who will be bringing their expertise to bear on today's discussion. Black voices on Black lives, perspectives, and calls to action. And I just have to say at the outset, I am super pleased and excited to be a part of what's happening today because we know that change starts with thoughts and ideas that are shared. And so I want to thank Council President Jones for the opportunity to be here and to participate. Clayton and I have been friends for many years. And again, that's a testament to the power of the Black community. And one of the reasons why I'm here today. And I want to just say also at the outset to Judge Mathis and Council President Jones, or really everyone here, that we know that these are times that we live in wherein we need leadership. Everyone is looking for what we need to do. And so I want to thank you all so much for your dedication in terms of helping us to navigate through these chaotic times. And just a little bit more about me. Yes, I work for Channel 4 News, and I did grow up in historic Conyers Gardens. I went to Renaissance High School because we got another Renaissance person on today, which is super cool. University of Michigan, and then I went to Wayne State's Law School. But I'm also the mother of 3 African-American boys, 18, 16, and 13. And I do have a history of civil rights activism in my family. If any of you have read the works of Robert Franklin Williams, Rob Williams, who was one of the first to openly advocate for African-American people to take up arms, but that's another conversation. The point is for today, I am happy really to be here with you. And my goal really is to provide us an avenue for leaving with everyone being more informed. I'm hoping inspired. Everyone who's tuning in out there, I want you to feel supported and to be reminded of who we are and why we need to be taking action. To renew ourselves and to understand that we have a community base that makes us powerful, and also to help us to be willing to move on what's right and what is just. And like a good friend of mine said to me this morning, if we don't do something right about now during these times, we likely ain't never really gonna do nothing, because we can see that the uprising right now that's happening really is needed. And so today we are organized in this way. We will have 3 separate panels, which Mr. Grady so kindly outlined. Our first panelist will be that of Judge Greg Mathis, Council President Jones, as well as we have Mrs. Charity Dean. So let's begin with panel 1. I have to say, I want to start out a little bit with Dr. Martin Luther King. I mean, what he said, and he was so eloquent in so much of what he left us in terms of principles, that oppressed people truly cannot remain oppressed forever. The yearning for freedom eventually manifests itself, and I think that's what we're seeing. So if we were to start with you, Council President, because we want to thank you for this afternoon, really at the epicenter of this uprising is police brutality. One of the impetus for why we are moving forward, obviously the death of George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd. And we've seen so many countless unlawful shootings resulting in the murder, disproportionately, of course, of Black men. Just at the outset, Council President, what really, people who are tuning in, they may not be as civic minded, they may not have the tools. What can your average citizen do to have their voice be heard?
Thank you so much for that question, and good afternoon to you, and good afternoon to all of the panelists. It is so important that the average citizen let their voices be heard. And let me start off by saying we have seen many protests go on around the United States of America, and it's okay to protest. But what's important to me is that when they protest in a peaceful manner. And so the average citizen is out, they're protesting in a peaceful manner. And let me just say to you and to the panelists, one of the things that has been important to me is to see the average citizen that have been out protesting are younger people. And when you see our younger people out and getting involved, that is so important. So let me just add, and I'm going to come back. I'm having some technology problems, and I'm trying to get these technology problems corrected. But let me just add, it is so important. And here it is that everyone let their voices be heard, go out, talk to the younger people, vote. That is one of the most important things, vote. And the other thing is make sure you're letting your voice be heard and fill out your census. I'm going to come back on to more things that are important, but I just wanted to stop there as I continue to deal with my technology problems and go to my other panelists.
Okay, and we will get that ironed out. Judge Mathis, is Judge Mathis here? I have not been able to pull up that view that includes Judge Mathis. Is he on? Is Judge Mathis joining us? Is he on? If not, we will move on to our next question. Maybe there's an overall Zoom issue because I'm not hearing any response. So,
I do see Amir Mathis on.
Yeah.
Judge, is that you?
Yeah, can you hear me?
now,
Yes, sir, we can. Welcome.
Can you see me?
no, I cannot.
We can see a dog on a body.
Okay. If you would move to the next person, I'll try and rectify that.
Okay,
Yes.
very good. Well, let us
They can't
please
see
then,
you.
let's let Judge Mathis take care of that photo that he had there. So we move on to Charity Dean, who we thank so much for joining us. Of course, Charity Dean is the Director of Civil Rights for the City of Detroit. And really, I think what prompted me when we think about all of the civil unrest, which has to do with an understanding that laws and policies are not equally applied and distributed. Can you just, again, for those people who are logging on, who may not be as civic minded, have not been as participatory, but we're looking now really to arm and educate citizens about their civil rights. I mean, what do you really think is most important in this discussion that citizens can do to ensure that laws and policies are really just and equitably applied?
Well, first, thank you so much for having me. And I want to thank Council President and her team for putting this on. And I'm just honored to be here with so many esteemed guests. What I'll say is, you know, the best way is to be engaged, right? To know your rights, to be engaged. And, you know, Detroit is really unique in that, you know, the laws for Detroit are progressive. Like our civil rights statute in the city of Detroit is more progressive. I mean, we saw, I know we're talking about Black lives, but there's an intersection of, you know, equality. And we saw the Supreme Court finally 2 days ago say that it was illegal to fire someone because of their sexual orientation or if they're trans. And Detroit has had that law on the books for over 10, 15 years. And so Detroit has always been kind of a leader in that way. But a lot of times it's the application of the law, I think, Lauren, sometimes, or the application or the experience, the one-on-one experience. But I think people should be engaged, and then we got to fight. I mean, power is not given, it's demanded. And so people are paying attention now because people took to the streets to say enough is enough. And sometimes, you know, that's what it takes. I think we all have a role to play. There are some folks that can lead in city government. There are some folks that will lead because they're activists. Some people will lead because they're politicians. Some people will lead with their vote and then encouraging other people to vote. Every single one of those people have a role to play, and we need them all to engage and fully engage in order for us to have change.
Can you go speak then specifically to where the average citizen might go just to get a sense of what are the laws? Because I think when I look at raising my sons, if you are not proactively looking into what do I need to know, because when I walk outside of my home, there are these invisible policies and laws that apply to me, and I need to know what they are. What would you suggest?
So a couple things. I know a number of, so I'm an attorney, and I know that a number of my fellow attorneys put on, and we've done, you know your rights seminars or attending know your rights workshops. Those happen all the time. The other thing I would say is do the same thing you would do if you wanted to learn anything else. Google it. I mean, this is the world that we live in. And when we were in quarantine, so many people learned so many new skills because we took time to say, let me do some research and figure out how to knit, or let me do some research and figure out. And so there is a level of responsibility that I think to go and to learn, but also we have a responsibility to educate. We've got to educate our kids. We've got to educate our families. That's how we do it. And especially as Black people, because the education that our children are getting in school is not our history. And so we have a responsibility as people to be educated and educating.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much for that. So Judge Mathis, we're going to come back to you. How are you today?
Fine. How you doing?
I'm all right. I see you got your Hollywood lighting going on.
I don't know about that. I haven't even looked behind me.
Well, it's good to see you, and of course.
But I want to tell folks, I was going to say, in the 30 years I've known you, you've been an activist. So this isn't your first time, as you say, your parents as well, and now your son, I understand, is quite an activist, leading protests here. So congratulations on your work in the community.
Thank you. So, it's wonderful.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for acknowledging that. It's wonderful to know that, some of what you say as a parent is actually seeping in. A little bit is getting through.
That's correct.
But we know that you have a unique perspective, having grown up in the city of Detroit and now, of course, working in the legal system. And we just learned, of course, that Minneapolis has voted there to dismantle the existing police department as they know it. And it has always been my thought process, and the way I look to teach my children is that we are living through the problems of man-made constructs, the concept of policing, the concept of being armed to carry a weapon. These are all man-made constructs. Police don't grow on trees, so this is not nature. This is something we've made up, which means we can unmake it up. And so what would your thoughts be about when we hear this chorus of defunding the police, and what I like to say is rethinking police?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, with regard to defunding the police, I think they're just using the wrong words. They have to find a better way to present what they're requesting, and that is to transfer some of the appropriations that has gone to the police department toward, fighting crime to more community-oriented departments and divisions. So I think they're just using the wrong term, but the objective, I think, is an honorable one, to use some more of the money for community. And let me also reflect on community policing in Detroit. The primary reason some would suggest that Mayor Coleman Young was our first Black mayor to be elected was the platform that he ran on. And for the most part, that was to eliminate police misconduct and brutality. I can remember as a kid, the Big Four and the stress and all the other brutal police divisions of the police department. They'd come and throw us up against the car for no reason, and later beat us if we had a complaint about it, rip off the dope guys, and then try and resell the same dope back to them. I witnessed all that. So it was a massive amount of corruption and police oppression. And Coleman Young, Mayor Coleman Young, that is, his election put that in reverse, if you will. In fact, that's exactly what he initiated. One, an affirmative action policy within the police department. And by the way, I love everybody. I love all Black people. Black Lives Matter, white folks. We need affirmative action. We can start there if you're really sincere and not just having a fit. Let me get back to what I was saying, however, and that is with the police department, it was transformed under Mayor Young. In fact, they had neighborhood policing was probably the first of its kind, came from Mayor Young. And we had neighborhood precincts and many police stations, that was the name of them, all throughout the city. And unfortunately, it diminished a little after him leaving. But we have a great history, quite frankly, in the community relations. Now, of course, we have in our history some corrupt police officers, but much of that was, quite frankly, gang and drug driven, not so much demonizing of Black men. So I think we have did better than many other cities, at least historically.
Back to the point, thank you so much for that, Judge Mathis, and back to the point that Mrs. Dean made having to do with some of the changes. And then also, Judge Mathis, you mentioned affirmative action. And my son, who helped to organize that last walk that took place 2 Sundays ago in Birmingham, said that, you know, all voices need to be a part of this conversation. And so what would you say, so we're not preaching to the choir here, how do we engage allies that may not necessarily be here on the Brown panel? How do we engage allies to understand the importance of what we're doing? And Council President or Judge Mathis or Mrs. Dean?
Well, let me say, if the, I think that the majority of American and probably the world population are allies at this juncture. And so we must know what to ask our allies for. You can't get anything if you don't know what to ask for. If you ask for the wrong thing, you get nothing. So it is my belief that we should give a few choices, and affirmative action, in my opinion, being the least. If most of our history and current circumstance throughout our history as a result of, is economic in nature. It's economic use of our labor to enrich this country and those whom have in the past been rich, and also the current rich. Then we know that the economic circumstances of divesting out of our communities and turning them into impoverished, crime-driven communities as a result. And that's all economic base. So I say we ask for those things which is going to change our economic condition. Because after all, you won't have to live in a life of, you won't have to live in a crime-rich community if you have economic situation that can get you out. The best solution to crime is a job with livable wages. But nonetheless, if we ask for the right thing, I think we'll have a chance at changing our economic condition. Bob Johnson, my dear friend, and I've debated with him, he's advocating, some of you may have seen in the media, reparations. Dollars, flat out reparations, but I certainly support HR 40. It's the bill, Brother Conyers, Ian, you would know a lot about this, that John Conyers proposed for nearly 30 years or more to create the study of reparation by the US Congress. They won't even vote it out of committee to study reparations, to see if it's deserved by Black folks. As much reparations have been given out throughout the world. They won't even vote to study the consideration. And then we have the third consideration is affirmative action. And so at the very least, let's show us a sign. You love us so much, show us a sign. I don't mean to be skeptic. I don't mean to think, be game shy, as they call it on the street. I don't mean to be game conscious, but, if you love me, show me a sign. And so that's the sign we need, a sign that will change the economic conditions of our community. Most of the unarmed killings of Black men have occurred in crime and impoverished communities. Why? Because they've been demonized. They've been demonized by the stereotypes that they're criminals, angry sex predators. And so as a result of that, we are brutalized, but it's primarily that stereotype exists among poor Black men. And so it is, most of it, in my opinion, and that's what we need. I'm sorry for talking so much. I'm a lawyer. Don't ever let a lawyer talk.
That's right. Look, I gave over the microphone to the wrong one, but no, all important. And I took copious notes, and we will circle back again because Mrs. Dean and of course Council President will have an opportunity to speak again. But we do have our next panel who we would like to bring in. So we would ask that the second members of the panel would please turn on your videos at this time. And we will have 5 new panelists joining us now. And we are going to be focusing now on social media and health and wellness, our spirituality and some of the other dynamics. So welcome. Thank you so much for being here, everyone. And you know what? Let us begin with one of the most powerful tools here today. We're talking about social media. Who knows how many people are on social media? If you're not on social media, you need to put a toe in. It's just like still driving your check over to the bank versus, maybe using some of the online services. I understand, there's a little bit of a trust factor there, but social media is a powerful tool. We have statistics say 3.5 billion users. That's with the B. That's 45% of the population that are now on social media. So people don't have to wait for the 6 o'clock news. It used to be, let's wait, 2, 4, and 7. That's where we got our information, our entertainment. So we know it's a powerful tool, and we still have a learning curve that's associated with it. How do we use it without letting it abuse us, like letting it become too much? So we have some of our social media experts here. Chantel Watkins is a native Detroiter. She's joining us today, and she is a progressive woman who is both a poet and organizer and a community leader. So let's talk right off the top, Chantel, about just how powerful is this pervasive social media tool, and how is it really shaping the perspectives and galvanizing the community during what I call this current uprising?
I think that it is one of the most important things right now with social media, because a lot of times you don't hear about who has been killed by the police or what issues are going on across the world unless you log on to Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. The information spreads a lot faster to people who don't necessarily watch the news. A lot of people are like, oh, I don't watch the news, but they pay attention to it on social media, and they read articles on social media, and they can even interact with people in the cities where these things are happening. A big thing that has happened to protesters who have been met with force is that people are telling them who have been met with force in the past how to, deal with being tear gassed or deal with being pepper sprayed. So there's a lot of information. Even when you come to the different types of protests, people are able to interact and learn in ways that they never have before.
Absolutely. I can say from that personal experience of being a part of the walk, that BAM, one of the student-led organizations, put together, that was all social media. And they're able to post and get, thousands of people out on a Sunday afternoon who want to participate. And where would we be without some of these technologies, the video, because everybody's got a cell phone, so everybody can document and everybody can become their own news reporter. So
Yes.
also joining us is Miss Chiara Clayton, and she has 20 years of professional experience in community outreach, public speaking, event planning, etc. So let's shift and talk a little bit about the corporate side of social media. So some really interesting dynamics are taking place there, in that there's really a new intersection between the individual and the corporation. It used to be Facebook, social media was all about, well, who's graduating and who got married and whose dog looks cute. But now, because some of our politics are there, corporations are having to really pay attention now and say, we need to understand what this influence is and how we need to cater to our corporate citizenship to ensure that we are meeting what our customers or our onlookers would expect from us. Can you speak a little bit about that, Chiara?
Yes, first of all, thank you so much for being on this awesome panel. I sat up a little taller when I saw the great people who I will be sharing this with. But just to speak to social media from a corporate standpoint, I am a social media strategist. I work for a major nonprofit in Southeast Michigan, and I have quite a few clients that kind of have me to do their social media strategy for them, for their companies. And I spend a lot of time on social media. As my counterpart said, I do get all of my news from social media as well. So what we're finding is that companies know that. They know that their constituents and those that patronize them are also there. So what we've been seeing recently is that people have kind of been feeling the need to speak on what's going on, to show their solidarity, to show that they support. So I know we've all seen in the last 2 weeks a slew of companies coming out with actual statements stating that they, are for the Black Lives Matter issues going on right now. They're supporting the cause, that they're all about unifying everyone. And that's really because of social media. It took a couple companies to do that and put that messaging out. And then you saw entities that you would have never thought say something actually coming out. We saw, what was it, last week, the Blackout Tuesday. That was huge. That started with a couple record companies that wanted to do that, and then it spread. And you had companies, and you had, somewhat non-diverse companies going Black on social media. And you're like, wow, okay. But what it said is that someone that is patronizing them that is of color, wow, they're kind of woke. They know what's going on. So social media is playing a huge part from a corporate standpoint. And it's also playing a part on the not so good point, as we saw with Starbucks last week. I'm quite sure we all saw the backlash that was swift and quick with Starbucks when it was put out that they didn't support their employees wearing Black Lives Matter paraphernalia. But then it was, brought to the attention that they support their employees supporting Pride. June is Pride Month. Well, that got out, a call for backlash or a boycott of Starbucks by their African American patrons. Literally within less than 24 hours, they released a statement saying that, oh, we're sorry, we didn't mean that. We're actually going to encourage, and we're going to actually manufacture Black Lives Matter paraphernalia. So that's just the power of social media with companies. A lot of companies are hiring strategists. They're hiring people specifically in their marketing department for social media to stay on tune, to kind of know what's going on, to make sure that social media, which is an open door to a lot of companies, a lot of entities, that they're not missing the ball, they're on task, and they're being timely with what they're posting. And we're seeing it more than ever now during what's going on in our country.
Right, and thank you so much for that, Chiara. Yes, and we are seeing a lot, and I would like to go back to you with that, because I really want both you and Chantel to encourage people that are logging onto Facebook that might want to get on social media. Now, I'm not telling you need to spend hours and hours on Facebook like some people get stuck with that, but I'm telling you to use it as a powerful tool that it is. We got to stop and think about how negative news can travel so quickly, and we know that social media is like your own window, your own billboard, and if you speak in a certain way about a certain company and it gets traction, they have to listen to you. So, but with that said, we also have someone who is on the panel today, a psychologist. We have Dr. Riana Elyse Anderson. And I think it's really important for us to consider our mental health when we think about everything that, just the African-American experience in America, but just on the heels of talking about social media. I know for me, media sometimes can be a little exhausting because it is available to us at all times. We can log on at any time, 24 hours a day, wake up, look at it, go to sleep looking at it. And it interrupts your sleep pattern. And now we're seeing traumatizing videos. I don't know about you, but when I watched Roots as a teenager, I became intimately familiar with inhumanity and brutality by some, and I didn't need it anymore. I don't need to see it. I know what it is. I've read about it and I get it. So, for instance, George Floyd's video. I knew what the content was, but I had to turn away. I didn't want that to impact my being. So I want to bring in Dr. Riana Anderson so she can share a little bit of insight about how do we navigate everything that's happening and keep ourselves sane.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And it's interesting coming on the heels of the social media speakers, because we actually know that watching these traumatizing videos can amplify trauma, stress, depression, and anxiety for Black youth and adults. So on the one hand, yes, I want you to go with what my sisters were saying and utilize it as a mode of getting your message across, of finding your group, of finding your tribe online. And when you see videos like that, or you're starting to get into these hour 2, hour 3, where you're scoping out information and you're getting stuck with this trauma, you're watching it again and again, that's when we need to put the phone down. That's when we need to go outside, take a walk around the block, call someone you love, and understand that this is not something that's going to rule your day. It does not have to ruin, it does not have to take your entire mood from a 10 to a 1. You're exposed to it, you know that it exists, but really getting involved with it so much can be traumatizing or increase your stress. So again, thinking about your support systems, how are there folks who are around you who can support you? Can they call you? Can they send you a greeting of some sort? Can they do a drive wave across, your front porch? Is there something that they can do to just show that they love you in this time in which so many of us have experienced loss? So many of us have seen images of loss where we're wondering, can it be us? Could it be my son? This is bringing the past, 4 months for Black people, especially in Detroit, have been some of the toughest times in our lives, I'm sure, that we can speak to. So do you have the support of the people around you? And even if you do, would making that one call to a therapist, trying to get in telehealth right now, where there are so many people offering services online, so many people that are giving free services to folk of color, can you take advantage of that and get your needs met by someone who's like, listen, no judgment, I don't know you, I'm just taking your information and I'm speaking back what I'm hearing to you. I'm not telling you what to do. A lot of people think therapy is all about telling folks what to do. I'm listening to you. I'm taking your burden off of you, and I'm trying to give you some relief. So in this time, again, finding social support or perhaps professional support, because y'all, we are going through it. This is not normal. This is not something that you should be okay with. You shouldn't burden the strong Black woman, superwoman, or like strong Black man, John Henryism. We shouldn't be doing that. We should be unpacking and unburdening some of these really traumatizing things.
And hearing from you, we likely need to be on with you like for the next 2 hours, and you need to post your phone number. Just go ahead and put it on up to the screen, because
I got you.
All of us need some form of a release. Just the African American experience, we can go back to what James Baldwin said. It is to be enraged, and that is not a space to be in. So again, I always have to go back to when I'm in my teacher mom mode, I'm training my children to be aware, training them to be awake, as we say, to understand our history, but I also remind them to protect your peace, because this is your life too. And you deserve to have joy. If anybody deserves to have some joy at this point. So we have to really be careful. And I appreciate you encouraging the African-American community to take care of your mental health. And so we also have Pastor David Crossley from the Awakening Faith Church. And I want to make sure I can see him here on my screen as well. We need to talk about, of course, the Black church has always been powerful at the epicenter of what we do. Our spirituality came over with us, and we continue to utilize that space where we can create and galvanize and renew ourselves in so many ways. But can we talk just briefly about some of the psychological impact that you may be seeing in some of your parishioners, but also the role of the Black church as a central place in our community, and how we should expect that the church could be involved and be impactful at this stage, because, you know, we got some tensions, some things are changing with social media and the internet.
That's the one that did the work.
Yes, it's a very interesting time to say the least. As a pastor, sometimes obviously in the Black church, so thankful to have therapists on here, but you become a lot of those different roles in the Black church. So I've had to deal with Black men who are struggling emotionally and obviously directing them toward professional help, but trying to, you know, put a Band-Aid there or stop the bleeding a little bit. But from the Black church perspective, and I would just say from the church perspective in general, we have an issue. We have a major racial issue in the church. And we're dealing with this in the streets, but we are also dealing with the impact of this in the church, because by and large, the white church has gone voiceless in regards to this. I'm so grateful and thankful that over the last few years, I've been a voice to call out some of our white brothers and sisters who have been voiceless regarding the racial issues in our country, systemic racism and racism in the church. But my experience in church, I come from a traditionally Black conservative background as church is concerned. And I have engaged with and dealt with so many white people, evangelicals, who moralize in these moments, and they don't take the opportunity to listen to Black people and find out what our real life on the ground experiences are, so that they can be much more compassionate toward our plight than what they are. So from our standpoint, for me, I have been directing a large portion of my teaching and instruction toward our white brothers and sisters, because we need their voice. We need their voice to speak up for us. We need them to use their privilege. I saw a video of white people denouncing their privilege. I don't subscribe to that. Keep your privilege, but just use your privilege as leverage in order to help us fight against wicked powers that are on our neck. I'm calling out these individuals, some privately, some publicly. Rod Parsley, who is a pastor in Ohio, a megachurch pastor, who's an evangelical, but is widely accepted amongst the African-American community, swung single-handedly the 2004 presidential election in Ohio by going to Black churches and speaking to them about traditional Black family, a lot of the tenets that we stand on as born-again believers and as Christians. And he swung the vote in a very historic fashion. A lot of Black people voted Republican that year. And what we got from him 3 or 4 days ago was him standing up and moralizing against Black people, saying that slavery was a birth defect of the country, essentially saying that we should get over slavery, that all of the slave masters, the forefathers of this country who owned slaves, freed their slaves before they died, like that was some badge of honor. Okay. And then he took the post down and came back with an apology that never said he was sorry. And so it's been my position, my role, and I've received a lot of attack from Black and white people on these particular points, but I want to call to accountability our white brothers and sisters, especially those that are church leaders who sing kumbaya with us and hold hands with us when it's election time, and they come into our churches and they moralize on us. But when they leave us, or when it's time for us to actually need them to stand with us, they call racism a birth defect.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that perspective. And I think that what you're sharing is absolutely one of the key ways that we can be proactive as a community. Everyone logged on can take that message back to their church groups and committees and talk about how maybe there can be some form of community engagement, you know, cross interfaith engagement so as to be able to bring that about. Let's also bring in now Darnell Blackburn, and he's been actively involved in law enforcement for over 27 years, and for the last 16 years, he's worked for the Michigan Commission on Law Enforcement Standards, MCOLS, which is nationally recognized actually as a leader in the development of training and ethical standards for law enforcement officers. Okay, so we've heard about defund the police, dismantle police, rethink policing, and we've also heard about training really being a key part of a commonly suggested solution. If we just train police officers differently, if we make sure they don't have cultural and racial bias, we do some pre-hiring training. You know, we've talked through here in my house about what can we do to really solve the problem. But I, again, teach my boys, let us think deconstructively. Let us think way outside of the box, because we created this box so we can dismantle this box. Talk to us, because I know training is something that you spend a lot of time in. How important is it, and do you really think it can work to help to solve the issues that I don't even need to outline, because we all know what they are?
Well, thanks, Lauren, and everybody for having me on the panel. Say that first. How do you untrain racist or biased behavior? If it's in you, it's in you. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't do more training. That's a huge thing. I think what we need to do is more vetting and better vetting. We have a psychologist in the call on this meeting right now, and it's so important to understand that in Michigan, and I'm sure it's like this in other states as well, that once a police officer becomes a police officer, they go through the vetting process. There is a psychological evaluation. If an agency chooses to do one, a medical doctor can sign off on the form, which is a sad state of affairs. But most agencies do have a psychologist evaluate the person before. But once that person gets on the job, for example, I mean, being after you're a police officer for 2 years, 3 years, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, you see so much stuff. And there's so many things that an officer sees. So what I think would be a great solution or great help is to actually have these officers be evaluated on a 3-year or 5-year basis, and have them evaluated for moral fitness, for suitability, if they can do the job. There may be somebody who started off doing the job with good intentions, but fell down a slippery slope because of PTSD and all the other mental health challenges that they have. So I think really, when you talk about training, yeah, it's a good thing. I'm a trainer. I'm all about training, but you can't untrain a way of thinking. I think we just have to do better chance of vetting, and we got to get more diversity. As the judge said, I mean, some form of affirmative action that needs to take place, because there's not necessarily that, but there's so many people who want to do this, well, not now, but there were people who look like us that want to do the job that are discouraged because they don't know how. They don't know how to break through those barriers. So I think that's just, it's really key. Yes, you have to train, but the solution is really doing a better job of vetting and continually vetting officers as they go through.
I thank you so much for that. And I am shocked that that level of reassessment is not taking place. Again, we have come up here at my kitchen table with solutions that suggest not only does there need to be pre-hiring, additional vetting for cultural bias, et cetera, but ongoing treatment for your mental state. When you're asked to be in fight or flight mode on a regular basis, they are human beings. We must give them the support they need so that they can actually perform the job that we want them to do. So that's right in step with, I think, is a way to help improve. But before we move on to our next panel, Council President Jones, would you like to chime in on some of what we've just talked about in this segment?
Thank you so much. I'm sitting here just writing notes as everyone is talking, and yes, there's so much has been said to be chimed in on. One of the things I first wrote down is how, important social media is and that we use it properly. Also, often, so many people have said it's a white media, that African Americans really don't have a place in media, so you're only seeing what the white media shows you. When you look at social media, that gives Black lives an opportunity to be important. And what you video is something that we see is being caught on, because if you look at what has happened back before we had social media, you wasn't seeing videos that were being reposted of police brutality. And now that you have social media, it's caught on fire. It's caught on fire. And so that gives everyone an opportunity to let their voice be heard. But the one thing I always say, I said as I go into the high schools and I talk to our younger people about social media, make sure you're using it right, because what you put up on social media, you can't delete it. It's going to follow you for life. So make sure you're using, yes, it will follow you for life. Make sure you're using social media properly. That's the one thing I always say. The other thing I was writing down as we were talking is about protesting. And protesting, the thing that's important while you're protesting, and someone teased me and said, you know, what happened back in the civil rights days when people protested? They didn't just protest and then go home, sit and eat dinner. There was always some type of action that followed. So when you protest, have some action prepared to follow. Don't just go out there just to be walking, to say I'm out here protesting. Talk to your lawmakers. Make sure that the laws are changed as you protest, because that's one thing that the lawmakers have control over as legislators. Change the laws. Make your walking make a difference and not just exercise for you to say I'm out there walking. The other thing I was thinking about too, as we were talking about police mentality and all of that, is we talked about residency and how important residency could be when you're talking about police brutality, and making sure that the people that look like you are the ones that are out there being in the field. It makes a difference in two different areas. One, do you think you would have all of the police brutality that you have if a neighbor knows that the officer that lives right down the street is the officer that just beat up the African-American person? And so when people are able to relate to and identify with who's actually committing or beating up and doing the police brutality, because they're your neighbor, it also gives an opportunity for, when you talk about Black Lives Matter, mentorship. If a young African-American sees the African-American police officer down the street, it gives them an opportunity to say, I want to be just like Joe Brown who lives down the street. And so I think it's so much important when you talk about Black Lives Matter that we have to not just get out there and walk. We also have to change our mental state of what's doing. And you can change and you can train people all day long, but can you train them common sense? Because to me, it's common sense that you don't put your knee on somebody's neck where they can't breathe. How much training can you do to someone to say that's wrong? I'm gonna stop talking because I can be like the judge. And I'm not a lawyer, but I can continue to go on because I have so much passion about what is going on. Being a person that was born in the South, and I was born in the South and then moved to Detroit in 1967. And some of the things that I'm seeing happening now are things that was going on when I was born. And so we're talking about it's year 2020, and to see the same thing happen. We're talking about a song that we have been singing, we shall overcome. When we overcome? When will we stop not dealing with the same thing? It's time for a change. And I think, again, when you get the young people involved, that's when you see a change happen.
Well, let me first thank Council President Brenda Jones for inviting me to participate. She is a dear friend. I am a longtime supporter of hers for whatever she runs for. And in this case, it's for to represent the 13th Congressional District in Washington, D.C. And so certainly I'm supporting her and ask everyone to support her in the work that she's done. Y'all can't tell me that I shouldn't have mentioned anything political on this conference, but I am the judge. So I think I can say what I want. No, I'm just kidding. But I say all that to say, you know, in campaigns for office these days, the social media arm is perhaps one of the most important. And unfortunately, in our community, we're failing. In our community, we have more social media interaction in proportion to our numbers than any other race in America. We use it more in proportion to our numbers, yet we use it for entertainment purposes more so than things that can make a difference in our lives. For example, we could make a big difference in the lives of ourselves and others if we used it to help electoral politics, whether it's to use your social media, your Instagram, your Facebook, TikTok, and the other things that are aboard to retweet and etc. For your elected official of choice, or whether you, as an elected official or as a candidate, whether you ask for money over the internet or donations, if you will, for your candidacy, as Bernie Sanders and others have done so well at. And that's what I mean by us Black folks have been failing in that area. Our young folks and adults and older folks have not become accustomed to sending money by way of the internet, whether it's as little as $10 or $20 in mass. Bernie Sanders' crowd does all of that, including the opponent that we are engaged in. But it's primarily about 90% of those who contribute to campaigns online are of non-African American descent. So we have a lot to do there. Secondly, in lobbying our elected officials who are there regarding the public policy that involves our interests and protecting our interests and your community. Well, it's not enough just to email now or vent on the internet. If you're emailing or if you're venting on the internet, tell the folks to call. I'm sure that most of the elected officials that I know would agree that calling represents a lot more passion for an issue than just getting on the internet, pushing a couple of buttons. You spend time calling somebody's office, going through 3 people until you get to the candidate or the elected official themselves, except for Council President Jones. You call one time, you get one person, and that's her. But other than that, these elected officials, you have to call them, and they know that. Yes, ma'am.
Judge,
So yeah.
I'm going, because it is Minds and Knowing is moderating. I want to hear from our business people, and I want to say, let's also use social media to let people know that we have African Americans that are in business and that we also need to support our African Americans as well who are in business, because also often we don't support our own. And I just had to throw that in, Judge. I know you have the floor, and I know because you're the judge. It's hard to tell the judge to be quiet.
I will be quiet. I'll introduce Ken Harris. How's that?
Well, how about we?
Okay. I see some of our business people, and we do not support our business.
We're taking the whole program from Miss Campbell, whom I've known by that for 30 years, but Miss Campbell Sanders, we've taken the program from you, so we're giving it back.
Okay, look at here. You see what I got? These are called switches. Who for? Okay.
That's right.
Leaves off and get everybody here in check. No, but let's talk about business. And as a matter of fact, there is, just came across in my texting earlier, someone here locally is launching a digital Black business directory, Noir Detroit, I believe it's called. And they're looking at the very thing. They want to be able to create this reservoir inventory so that you can find an African-American architect, the hairstylist. I know I've already submitted a couple of electricians, a builder, and those are some of the key ways that we can help to create that sort of economic shoring up that we know will make a difference, because dollars influence a lot. We're not trying to worship money, but we're trying to say that money is a tool, right? And with that said, let's bring in our next set of panelists. So we would like to bring in our 6 new panelists. So if panel group number 2 would turn off their video, and panel group number 3 can now turn on your video. Let's welcome Dr. Ken Harris. He's joining us. We have Ian Conyers, Brian McKinney, Tatiana Grant, Clement Fane Brown, and Myles Parker all joining us now. And we're going to be talking about economic power and money. And Dr. Harris, how are you today? So glad that you're joining us. I want to talk right off the top about this upcoming, I believe it's just July 7th. There's been a proposed boycott to not shop. I know there have been a number that have been spread about, but we know in our history in terms of civil rights movement, flexing the Black dollar has been very important to making sure that our voices are heard and not ignored. Can you speak to what you might be seeing and how we might in this internet stage of be able to flex ourselves?
Yeah, no doubt about it. Thank you, Council President, for inviting me on the call today. Lauren, it's always a pleasure. You've hosted several of our major events across the country. And I'll start by saying this, and I just want to set the precedent. I'm so proud of these young people. I think our ancestors are extremely, extremely proud of the movement that is taking place. And I always say this, that Dr. King was in his 20s, Angela Davis was in her 20s, Fred Hampton was in his 20s, Harriet Tubman, Sir Joyner Truth, Madam C.J. Walker, all of them, Malcolm X, were in their 20s and early 30s. So like Dr. Huey P. Newton said, the revolution always remains with the youth. And I'm glad to see the youth stand up. They're rebelling against police brutality. They're rebelling against economic injustice. They're rebelling against a society that they do not approve of. And so when we say 50 years later, post-civil rights, have we truly moved the needle? Today, folks, they're saying that Black Lives Matter. So I got to give a shout out to my young folks. But in a city that's more than 49,000 Black-owned businesses, which is 80% of the 62,000 total Black businesses in Detroit, it's extremely important that the entrepreneurial community make its voice known. And more importantly, that we claim our place inside of the political economy, and especially education. Money talks. And so when it comes to politics, when it comes to our consumer patronage of so many companies that benefit from our $1.5 trillion consumer buying power as a community, absolutely, we have to start looking at our corporate structures. And so the Black boycott, the Juneteenth boycott, any type of boycott where you have major corporations who do not have Blacks on their boards, Blacks in their executive leadership positions, Blacks in their contracting and procurement operations, Blacks that are getting marketing and advertising dollars. When you look at the corporate food chain, and this is not reflective of Black people, then we need to start taking into account how that should go. Like Booker T. Washington said, he had it right 120 years ago. And I'm very proud to lead his organization in which we have over 120,000 members nationwide with regional offices in LA, DC, Atlanta, and my headquarters in Washington, DC. You know, it's better to create a job and create wealth for yourself than to work 9 to 5. And when you look at this scenario, I ask my students all the time, would you rather work for someone else or would you rather create your own business? 99% of my students today say that they want to own their own businesses. So even if you have a career, you can still be entrepreneurship minded. And Black professionals who reach the corporate ceiling like yourself, Lauren, go into entrepreneurship yourself. You take those expertise and you put it into a money-making monetization of your own purpose and passion that you see in the community. And so I will always say this as I'm kind of wrapping up. The key to crime and socioeconomic ills in society is economics, entrepreneurship, and a thriving Black business economy. Either you own your own or you'll continue to be owned by somebody else. And I say it's what the young folks are saying, it's time to rise up and be free. So with that being said, Black people will not miss this digital revolution. the revolution will not be televised, it will be digitized. And so that boycott is not just in the streets, it's on social media, and it's all across the globe right now. And it's not just a Black thing. Melanin has transcended itself into the overall population across the globe. And so in the names of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and Rashard Brooks in the ATL, you know, the ancestors are with us. They're walking with us. And this is a time where Blacks are not only looking at history repeat itself, but I'm reminded by my students, this will be the last generation that will have to deal with white supremacy, racism, and all of its social and institutional structures. So thank you so much for having me on this panel, and I look forward to engaging from all the genius and intelligence that you've assembled today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Harris. And speaking of genius, we want to bring in a serial entrepreneur, and she actually, Miss Tatiana Grant. There's not a business that she won't tackle. She jumps in, and I think for me, and considering that we would be talking today, I think when we talk about owning your own, much to the commentary of Dr. Harris, what we are talking about, and my son Nigel talks about all the time, it's like he said, Ma, you can get to the point where you can buy your freedom. So you let that sink in for a minute, meaning I don't have to give you my time so you can give me money. No, I'm going to be building my own business so that I can buy my freedom. And this is a woman, Tatiana Grant, who is a Metro Detroiter, and she has such an entrepreneurial spirit. We worked together through the Michigan Women's Foundation when she was launching one of her first businesses. It was a food delivery business, and she won that competition. And she's gone on to do so much more. But Tatiana, bring you right in. Talk about what it takes in terms of the spirit of fearlessness and what you have to do, just in quick summary, and to encourage others to understand the power of entrepreneurship in this state.
Yes, so it is not easy in any way, shape, or form. You know, adding on to what Ken said, and even what Judge Mathis said, if you have the ability, I always recommend, if you have the ability to start under a corporate platform, build your network, you know, at this point, build your 401k, any sort of retirement, and be able to also build a business portfolio at the same time. I highly encourage that until you are able to fully make that entrepreneurial leap, because it is not easy. Luckily for me, I did have an opportunity to start in corporate in my early 20s, and I basically took that retirement money. And when I say early 20s, I started my first business at 24. So what I mean is I had 3 years of retirement from 21 to 24, and that little bit of money I took, and that's what I started my first business. And I got penalized for it. Now, as I'm much older, I'm learning that you get penalized when you take out money out of your retirement and things of that sort. But I at least had the fortitude to know that I needed to start putting money away. So of course, have the mindset that this is not easy work. When you talk about fearlessness, I've had to do this time and time again as I've entered into new industries. But I think the key to me, for me and the success that I've had, is to make sure that you have a need that people are willing to pay for. So it's one thing to just say, oh, you know, this is a great, everybody needs it. But have you really gone out and find out how many people actually need this? Have you started doing some sort of research to then find out who's actually going to pay for this and how much are they going to pay for it? And just having some baseline level of knowing who your customers are, and start building up somewhat of a plan, because I've seen far too often people go into business. I'm all about taking that leap and not having fear, but I've seen far too many people who have taken it probably a little too prematurely and really, you know, hurt themselves in the long run. And when you talk about generational wealth, you know, looking back, that's probably money that could have been reinvested, or if they just put a little bit more effort on the front end, on the research side of the business, it could have been that much stronger as they continue to grow it into the market.
And I'm so happy that you mentioned generational wealth, because I think that is what we we need to be focused on. And it was told to me by someone who I really celebrate and respect his wisdom, that, you know, our resources need to go forward, you know, not go backward. Let's bring in Brian McKinney. And Brian McKinney is the founder and CEO of Guyanga. Did I say that right?
You did. You did.
Okay, Guyanga. And since launching that in 2017, he has raised more than 300 structures in the city, giving the Detroit company a foothold in the demolition business and so much more. So let's though just talk to Brian about some of what you've experienced. And again, what we want to encourage is just a base level understanding of the power of being entrepreneurial, particularly in the state that we're in now.
Yeah, so first again, thank you guys for Council President for putting this on and you moderating. Tatiana is someone who's been on a lot of programs within activities, can hear his fame. So it's always, you know, good to know the people you're on a panel with. But, you know, for me, you know, entrepreneurship is about necessity and it's about pushing the culture forward. And so I think we often talk about business, but we don't talk about building capacity. And so for me, it was very much about building a business where you could actually produce and control the marketplace. For us, it's about jobs. So we're very data driven. We think that in order to create viable businesses in our community, we have to create living wage jobs. Like we don't want people working that can't buy a home, that can't send their kids to college, because and if they can't focus on the actual work at hand and they're focusing on other things, you're just not, to me, building a sustainable model. And so that from the onset with us has been very important. The challenges in the, you know, in being a Black business in this ecosystem is not only do we not have access to capital, we generally don't have access to knowledge. We don't have access to opportunity. We're very limited in the scopes and places of where we can participate. We're generally not given the opportunities to just, you'll hear these examples of some entrepreneur that was given some large project as he or she's first project in other communities, and they got to figure it out, right? Like we can't figure it out. We got to already have figured it out, proven it 17 times, and then, you know, we still got to jump over a hurdle. And so, you know, coming from a background in tech, looking at infrastructure, it was an area in which we just generally don't see African-American capacity building, right? Like we don't build roads, we don't build water systems, we don't have access in any way, shape, or form across this country in doing the very things that are necessary to sustain our economy. And that was just a challenge that we wanted to tackle.
And I appreciate those comments. I can speak again from an experience and knowing of a good friend who's working with the HNTB, that engineering company, and their large current client is the Michigan Department of Transportation as they expand I-94. Michigan is one of the only places where they help to break that cycle that you're talking about, where they say, well, you can't come in if you don't have experience, and you can't get experience if you haven't been in. Okay, so then how do we start to square one? And so that goes back to dollars, because if we have the money to fund advocacy, to be sure that these sorts of programs are put in place by our elected officials and otherwise, that again is why economic power is so important as a tool. Let's bring in someone who can make us look good. And I have seen him at the sewing machine personally. He's very good at what he does and has a tenacity that is, let me just bring you right on in. This is Mr. Clement, call him Fame, and I'm sure he can explain why that is. But if you have driven down Livernois, you will see one of his stores, 313, and he's been doing this since he was 12 years old. About 2002, he had placed his own brands. We're talking about clothing in well over 600 stores internationally. And in 2009, he was successful in registering a federal trademark for a creative spin on Detroit's area code 313. So let's bring you in, Mr. Brown, and talk to us, Mr. Brown Jr., talk to us a little bit about what I would say, again, in this climate of what we need in terms of financial uplift, what would be some of the keys that you would want to leave people who are logged on? We don't have a lot of time, but we really wanted to hear from you.
So thanks so much for your introduction, Lauren. That was super dope. Thank you, Council President Brenda Jones, for having me today. Super dope panel. Brian, what up, though? Tatiana, hey. Kenneth, powerful words, brother, powerful words, and I appreciate your knowledge and experience in this whole conversation right now. You know, I'm a little guy, right, in stature, and I'm a black boy, right, and I was raised by, and today's my mom's birthday, matter of fact. Today she's 61 today, and so, but my mom had me when she was 19 years old, and I already had a big sister, so I was raised by a teenage mother that was very passionate and hardworking and had to figure it out the hard way. You know, when you have children that young, a lot of opportunities are fleeting. And so I was raised with a self-determination that was instilled to me by my mom and my father as well, to where it was just no excuses for not being able to achieve. And so, you know, what I would leave this conversation with, and to definitely to echo Judge Mathis, you know, dollars, and Kenneth as well, dollars, economic power is the key. You know, economic power is the key. I put out a clothing brand some time ago, it's called Paperwork. And the whole idea was to teach brothers how to get their affairs in order. Because my concept was, you know, we take so much pride in how we dress. Maybe if we could learn how to do the things that we need through how we dress, it would be effective. And on the zipper of the jeans, I put a skeleton key with a dollar sign as a zipper pull. And guys would say, you know, why is a zipper pull? Why is it a dollar sign on the zipper pull? And I would tell them it's because we were taught to think the wrong way about ourselves. And, you know, money is the key. Money is the key. Nothing else. Money is the key. We were raised, you know, with this bravado. A lot of times as Black men, as, you know, if you're attractive, or if you got women, or if you're dating a lot, you know, that's something to be proud of. And really, it's the truth of the matter is economic power. And so self-determination, you know, my father always taught me that you have to use what you got to get what you need. And that's part of what 313 is built on and the foundation is built on. We have all these several brands that we carry in our store, from local designers, local brand builders. And the idea is us to use what we have to get what we need.
Let me, and I need to correct myself because I said 313. I meant to say 313.
Sure.
I apologize for that. But I think also what's powerful about your story, though, is a level of tenacity. And though in the tradition of who we are in terms of, you know, our culture, we know that money is a tool, but a part of our power is also our community and our family base. Mm-hmm. So without those things to be added to some sort of economics, we don't want to elevate money beyond what we know it is. It's a tool, you know, like social media.
No doubt. And it's not the money, it's what you do with it, right? It's what you do with it, right? And then it's what you're doing determines how much money you get, right? And so, you know, and then it all goes back to being self-determined. It goes back to not having any excuses about not achieving. And so, you know, we got things piled up against us. We always have. Me personally, like I started off saying, I'm a small guy, I'm a Black male, and I've never had it easy. And I was taught very early age in my life that I had to be better than everybody just to break even, just to get a tie, just so we can have an even score. And so what that instilled in me at a very early age is that, you know, you have to be better than the best as a Black man. And so, and that's just part of it.
Are you also providing maybe give back too, which is what we know has to happen? And we are really enjoying hearing, and there's so much more to everyone here in terms of what they can share their story, because look, like I say, I've been in the store and I know of this brother's energy and his powerful sort of essence. So if you haven't been in, you should go in. But we really want to make sure we hear from Ian Conyers as well as Myles Parker, because first of all, Myles Parker went to Renaissance High School. So I appreciate you so much, Myles.
It's Parks, by the way. I'm sorry, it's Parks.
It's Parks, I apologize. And you see, that's just like what a Renaissance student would do. Just, you know, already assertive, know how to step in. I appreciate that. Myles Parks, he graduated from Renaissance High School and he's using his voice. Maybe you were out there too with my son, Nigel, but he is active. And this is the group that we know will help to carry us. As one of my really good friends, she's a native Detroiter, but she lives in New York now, Crystal McCrary, did say that it will be the young people who will lead us out of this. And so, Myles, tell us a little bit about why you wanted to get involved in terms of making sure that you were active in making your voice heard.
So yeah, first of all, I want to thank Council President Brenda Jones. Thank you so much for inviting me, and everyone. It's a pleasure being on here with you all. But being a youth, I really believe that it was powerful for me to get involved because you don't see a lot of youth voices. Like you talk a lot about the social media aspect, but outside of that, you don't see a lot of powerful youth voices. And so I felt as though this, panels and discussions, things of that nature, was a healthy outlet to, outletting your voice and your feelings about this whole pandemic and the Black Lives Matter movement. And so I definitely felt like the youth had a powerful voice, and this is one of the ways that I share my story and my voice, just like other youth go out and protest, and other youth go out and write poetry and things of that nature. So I felt this was a positive outlet to, express myself.
Okay, so you have been activating yourself, which is so easy for us to watch. We can consume social media and watch and see everything that's happening and not really get involved, but you've chosen to be involved. And so let's also bring in now Ian Conyers. We appreciate you being here and waiting. Of course, he is an American politician who represented the 4th District of Michigan in the Michigan Senate for 1 term. He's a member of the Democratic Party. And talk to us a little bit more about why you feel that the movement that we're seeing in young people is so important. Of course, we can take that Sankofa African principle and look back and know that, with SNCC, I mean, the student nonviolent movement, we have always seen that sort of energy. I think what I'm hearing in 2020 is that they don't want what we have had, and they want something different, and they're willing to do the work. Tell us a little bit more about what you're seeing.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Greatly appreciate the opportunity from Council President Brenda Jones and, of course, Judge Mathis for speaking truth to power, as always. An amazing panel, amazing group of fellow Detroiters who are here to talk about this. And when we think about justice, when we think about peace, we understand there can be neither of those without the youth being involved and without that final frontier in the Black community, which is economic justice. There was a study that came out long ago which spoke about the household income gap between Black families and white families. We're talking about $17,000 in ours and nearly $265,000 in the average white family. Now, with the COVID crisis, that doesn't just take the roof off what's been going on. It shows the depth of the difference. And when you see young entrepreneurs starting their own businesses, understanding the history of what's been done, it really encourages not only those of us who are in the middle of our career, but those of us who have been involved in business for a long time. I had the honor of sitting on the Banking and Finance Committee in the Senate, where I was one of the only Black voices to say, hey, we need to be able to redirect these funds, not just loan programs, but grant programs, and not just looking at the history of the economic divide, but understanding when this started. Many of the systems that have been set up have been out of the root from the very beginning when we first got our freedom. If you look at the Freedmen's Bureau, if you look at not only separate but equal, but the economic envy that's come out of even when we do start our own businesses, even when we do have Black Wall Street, Black Bottom, there's still a conscious attack or an unwelcome bias towards our community. And so hearing all the entrepreneurs, being with you all today has been really furthermore inspiring for me to continue doing what it is that we do.
Yeah, and I wanted to, if I was okay to add to this one little, I see a lot of my friends are actually, striving to make changes as well. Education plays a big part about it, and now you see that a lot of people my age are actually going into political science and are going into the business field as well to actually implement that change. And so I just wanted to add that and to add to his point.
Okay, okay, thank you for that. And we had an original end time of 6:30, so we want to try to be within our time frame. We'd like to ask all of the panelists to please chime in again, open up your video, and we'd like to do a lightning round wherein we can hear from you as we wrap up today. You know, there's one point that we didn't really discuss that has to do with, I think, making a vast community change in terms of a large swath of people being affected, and that's in education. And I know at some point we will get back to that unless somebody wants to chime in. But again, when we talk about deconstructing our thought process and how we can be effective in the community, we wake up every day when it's during the school year and where everybody's just driving to work thinking it's okay that you grew up where the house is $50,000, and so therefore you have a certain tax base for your school, and you happen to be born over here where your house is 500,000, so you have a different tax base. And we say that that's okay. Everybody's just going along like a tax-based educational system is okay when that originates so much of the inequities in our community, so that you're already starting at a disadvantage. So as we just go through this lightning round and kind of wrap up some of the perspectives, please chime in and add into what you believe are some of the important concepts that we've hit on today in terms of just our voices being heard and calls to action. Shall I name who shall begin? I should. Okay, Mr. Blackburn, I see you nodding, Mr. Blackburn. You can start us off.
That didn't mean call on me. That just meant you named somebody else.
No, come on.
No, I think the bottom line is that we're all here for one purpose, and we're one body. And if we speak as one body and we act as one body, then we can get the mission accomplished much more than not. Change comes from the outside in, and I just ask that everybody would continue to work together. I mean, from the inside out, not the outside in, inside out. If we continue to work together, we'll be able to get things accomplished. So thanks for having me. Thank you, Council President. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Stacy, and everybody else. That's it for me.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And Mr. Is Pastor David Crossley? Yes, he's still on. Okay, my screen. Would you please share a few last words with us?
Sure. The scripture tells us in Genesis that when Cain killed his brother Abel, that Abel's blood began to speak and cry out for vengeance. The scripture tells us in the New Testament in Hebrews that the blood of Jesus speaks better things than the blood of Abel. So the scripture is consistent that blood speaks. And this is what's happening now. The blood of Native Americans, the blood of kidnapped and enslaved Africans is speaking now because the cup of iniquity is full. And so God is bringing equilibrium first in the realm of the spirit so that truth can manifest in our natural realm. The scripture says that everything that can be shaken will be shaken. What we're experiencing now in our country is this blood speaking, and is causing this country to shake. And our community, our African-American people, Black people all across this world are now awakening, and they're starting to roar. And when we roar, the whole earth shakes. And so I just want to encourage people that are watching, people that are listening, to make sure that they are standing on the right side of justice, because God is going to judge according to this. Whether or not we are on the right side of it, our hearts and our minds are on the right side of it, and we are fighting for the intrinsic value and the intrinsic right of every living thing, every human being. And so this is why Black Lives Matter, because the focus should be there now, because our intrinsic right and value has been violated.
Can't hear you, Lauren. I can't hear you.
Can't hear you.
Can't hear you, Lauren.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah.
And from a standpoint, if you would please mute your microphone until it is your turn to speak, that would be helpful so that we don't get any ambient noise. But I simply was saying, bear in mind that we're going to be going over the 6:30 time, but keep that in mind in terms of when you're making your final comments. Dr. Harris, would you like to share with us just one or two words within our time frame?
Yeah, in the spirit of the great Judge Mathis, I'll say this. History tells us that policing started rounding up the slaves and protecting white economic interests. And so this is a time for total disruption. When you keep doing the same thing over and over with the same leadership, not wanting change, expecting the same result, in psychological terms, that's called insanity.
Absolutely. Ian Conyers. Mr. Conyers, is he still on the line? Okay, well, Tatiana.
Yes, the one thing I would say is, you know, be the change. For me, over, you know, the time, I have been very, very conscious as to how I spend my dollars, making sure I'm purchasing from Black businesses, and going the extra effort. I've had to curb my Amazon spending, and things of that sort to make sure that I am really supporting small businesses, Black businesses. If it means, you know, I've even been starting to encourage some of my friends and family members, don't be discouraged about trying to go into law enforcement. Now is the time. I can't remember who it was, but somebody spoke about the mentorship within law enforcement agencies. So if being part of the change means you have to be part of the police force that's actually doing this work, don't be discouraged. Like, that's even more reason to probably go into some of these fields. So be the change is my last comment.
Very good, because that's radical, and I think a lot of people might think otherwise. So thank you. And that was Blackburn who said that earlier. Brian McKinney.
Yeah, I would echo what Ken Harris said, and just that, you know, we have to, you know, as the protests are happening in the community, we have to do it with our economy. We need to hold it all accountable, and we need to make sure that we demand change in how, not only where we spend our dollars, but how those we bank with. We saw with the PPP loans and EDIO and the grants and things that weren't equitable. We don't have access in the ways that other communities do. And we have, to this point, about buying power. And just, you know, we all should work towards watching not only where our dollars go, but influencing how our dollars are managed and demanding equity in every aspect of the corporate supply chain. You know, they can have moment of silences, they can donate to foundations, but they don't change their supplier vendor list. I mean, we have to hold an equitable line, because without Black business, there is no Black leadership. Without Black business, we can't sustain our own community. And one needs the other. Without Black leadership, there isn't Black business. I mean, so we just have to make sure that we are holding the line on all fronts, and not going for the shirts. You know, someone made a comment about painting streets, but then it's, you know, gentrification, inequality in the neighborhood, right? So it's just, to me, we have to hold the line in all aspects, and I just think we encourage everyone to do that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McKinney. And to that point, we can make our voices heard through social media, because if the vendor list is not what you need it to be, it's just like Yelp. You're looking for a great restaurant, you can get all kind of reviews, and you can get all kind of reviews on social media about, oh, you know, this company, they really have been supporting Black businesses, and this company does not. And so to that point, Chantel, Watkins, and Chiara, Clayton, would the both of you speak a little bit more about social media as we wrap?
Yes, I definitely think that it's very, very important to use our platforms in order to educate. Being open to speak to our policymakers, writing those letters, talking to other people about what's going on in their cities and states and what they need. I think the most important thing that we can do with our social media is not only educate each other, but learn from each other. And that's one of the biggest things that we have to do right now. Even having this panel is a really big help to a lot of people.
Chiara? She's on mute.
Can't hear you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I was gonna say, now is the time to really use our voices, both digitally on social media, but also in person. You know, now is the time to speak up, to be the voice, as Tatiana said, to be the change. You know, I don't know about you, but I feel like there is a strong change in the air. Social media has a big reason for that. We're now seeing all the injustices that we know that have existed. So we also need to see people being the change and holding companies accountable for these wonderful statements they're putting out, but also holding them accountable as well for what they're truly doing. Juneteenth is tomorrow. Instead of just putting up a Juneteenth flyer, are you educating your employees? What are you doing truly to educate the community and people about what Juneteenth means? So use your social media to not only just share something that makes you look woke, but to actually get woke. Use social media to show how woke we are and to use our voices at this time and hold these companies accountable for what they're posting.
I like how you said that. Yes, use the media. It is important to actually do about what it is you're posting. So maybe what you're also saying is that folks in the community can do less, maybe posting of just obscurities, and just be strategic and intentional sometimes about your posts. Am I right? Okay, well, Mr. Fame, I did cut you off a little earlier.
No, it's all good. It's all good. I appreciate everybody here. I've been really learning a lot. I would say definitely be conscious of your own value, right? We worth something. We worth something, y'all. And you got to own your own narrative. Own your own narrative. Tell your own story, right? Nightmares are dreams too. I always say nightmares are dreams too. There's value in the struggle. And like the saying goes, they never considered us being a seed when they thought they were burying us. And so, power to the people in real time and support those who doing the work. I know Detroit, this message goes to the gatekeepers. Gatekeepers, support those who doing the work. I know nephew is your nephew and niece is your niece, but there's some people who've been putting in the work that deserve the opportunity because they earned it. Support those people.
Thank you so much for that. Myles Parks.
Yeah, so first of all, I want to apologize for the connection issue I had a little bit earlier. But well, I think the first thing I would say was definitely adhere to investing in ourselves. I think one of the business people can attest to it. I think we as African Americans spend about $1.7 trillion a year, and we only give back about 3% of that to our own Black businesses. And so I feel as though once we invest in ourselves and our own businesses, our own media, our own schools and things of that nature, I feel like that will be a definite stepping stone into how we push ahead. And I feel like that's one of the other reasons I want to attend an HBCU was, to definitely be an example to that you can give back to your Black-owned businesses and schools and things of that nature. And to show that not only can I do what you all deemed impossible by becoming a doctor and getting higher education, I can do it with the Black resources that we all need. So I'll definitely say invest in Black businesses and Black culture.
Thank you so much. It sounds like creating sustainable communities seems to be, I think, in some of what we're getting at here. So Dr. Riana, Elyse Anderson, and we want to remain sane. We want to keep our peace in the midst of it all. So where's your phone number?
I'll get that to y'all. But just to give my 2 cents, I think agency and data are the 2 things I want to just wrap up with. So agency means that you know your lane and your level. So we've talked a lot about what might be the appropriate thing for you to do. It could be that young people out on the streets is the best thing for them to do because we know that acting and protesting and doing things that release what's within you is actually very good for us. And if you're able to, either as a young person or an elder, perhaps that's when the legislation comes in. That's when the calls come in. So we can all work together. We don't all have to do the same thing all the time. We can work together as a unified body to get our agency met. So stay in your lane, stay at your level, do the things that work best for you and your title to get something done. The second part is data. You're not gonna know how you're doing if this stuff is stressing you out, if you're getting freaked out by everything that you're seeing, unless you take the time at the end of the day to say, how am I doing? Did I do an assessment of myself? Did I breathe today? Did I check in with someone to say, was I acting a little different on that call? If you don't have the data to know about how you're doing, you're not gonna know when you need the help. So please, people, take your time, take your breath, take your energy, take your focus, and figure out how it is that you're doing so you can get what it is that you need.
Absolutely. So let us all take a collective breath together. Can we? Come on. Everybody in on 4, and we're going to be out on 4. when you feel that breath go in, it is something about it. When you pay attention to it, it really matters. Let us now bring in both Judge Mathis, who will give us some of his final words for today. And then, of course, we will have Council President Jones wrap us up.
Judge, are you still here with us?
I don't see him on my window.
The judge might have had to leave.
Okay.
Yeah, he had to leave. He's been quite busy these days. A lot of things that's going on.
May
Is
I,
Judge still here?
Council President Jones, if Judge Mathis is not here, that I just want to thank you so much for the opportunity to remain connected, you know, in the city that I grew up in, the city I love, and to really show, I think, by my participation that these are issues that not only impact me, you know, as someone who's lived here all my life, but, you know, I have 3 boys coming along, and just our community, we need to, as the doctor just said, Dr. Anderson, play your role in what's happening. And like I always tell my children, everybody can't be on the mic and everybody can't be in the audience, but it's okay if we all play our roles accordingly. So I just want to thank you so much for the opportunity to be here.
I want to thank you for taking the opportunity to be our moderator, taking the time out of your busy schedule to be moderator for today. Normally I am the moderator, but it felt good to sit back and listen to you and having a different perspective on hearing a great moderator, as well as our panelists. I want to thank all of our panelists for being part of our spiritual and mental illness for today, and all of it was spiritual and mental illness, whether or not you realize it or not. There was definitely some healing for all of us in what we heard today. I'm going to be very brief, but just want to just add a few things because I've been a small business owner as well. I had a women's shoe store downtown Detroit back in the early 80s when everybody said, why are you going downtown? Why don't you move to the malls? It's all happening at the malls, and I can see it coming back downtown. But we need to make it happen in the communities as well, and that's where it's starting to happen. So I want to just thank all of you for being here. I want to add, I have to throw this one in to you, Ms. Sanders, and to you, Mr. Parks. I'm a technical school graduate, but I'm not mad at you Renaissance high school people. But, you know, I always say there's nothing wrong with a second best Renaissance, but it's always the first best of Cass Technical High School. Sorry about that. I have a Renaissance in my family as well, so I'm sorry. I had to throw that one in because I had the opportunity. Sorry about that. I want to also
I think me and Dr. Anderson gonna get on you for that one.
That's okay. I can handle it. I have broad. I want to also.
She got broad shoulders and backup.
Also, Pastor led a great walk last Friday, and it was awesome seeing those out there walking on 8 Mile for a change, and it was a mixture of a group, and it was a good thing. So thank you, Pastor. I want to take the opportunity to thank all the business people in the city of Detroit. I've got to do a shout out to Brian because, you know, I always tell him I can never say his business name right. Guyanga company. And I have to give him that shout out because he hires 81% of Detroiters and African Americans, and so minorities. I have to give him a shout out for not just talking about it, but being about it as well. It's just so many shout outs. Once I start, Ms. Clayton, she is so active in the community. Thank you for everything you do. We love you.
I love you, Council President. Thank you.
Thank you.
You know I love you.
Yeah, I brought him down 313, 313, whatever we want to call him. He is always in the mix, and I brought him down to give him a Spirit of Detroit Award testimonial resolution. And I always say the Spirit of Detroit is not about the statue that's down there. The Spirit of Detroit is around in your heart. He truly carries that spirit around. Mr. Blackburn, thank you so much for the change initiative because you are there to always support and do what needs to be done. all of our panelists. I don't see them all. When you start calling our names, you get in trouble. Ian Conyers has been a great senator. He's done a lot of good work. And that's one thing I can say. What seasoned public servants can do right now is listen to the will of the people and use their collective experience and wisdom to legislate change. What it's time for. It's time for change. We've been dealing with the same thing for too long, and it is time for change. And tomorrow, I want to ask you all to join me tomorrow for coffee, tea, whatever your morning drink is, and conversation. As we talk about, we're going to have Judge Elyse Sabri with us tomorrow. We're going to have Attorney Todd Perkins with us tomorrow. We're going to have some awesome people tomorrow for 1 hour from 9 to 10, coffee conversations with the council president. And so if I missed your name calling you today, blame it on my head and not on my heart, because I truly appreciate all of you. I truly appreciate all of our listeners, all of our people that are watching Facebook. It's one thing about social media. You have an opportunity that, because whoever thought that we would have Zoom and be meeting like this for such a time as now, where we have social media, where we can record live, and where people can come back and look at it at a later date for such a time as now. Thank you all for joining us. I cannot leave out our interpreter, who has done an awesome job interpreting for us, as well as Team Jones, my team, who are the best in the East, West, North, and South. I love my team. I love Team Jones. Thank you all for everything you do. Thank you all for being a panelist. Thank you all for tuning in with us. We went over. I just want to say to the doctor, my degree is in psychology. I don't know. I don't take that time to, and so it's always someone else tell you exactly how to handle mentally what you should be doing, pastor, spiritually what you should be doing. Thank you all so much. I am going to tune off now because we have ran a little over. Again, Lauren Sanders, you know I love you, love you. Everything he's done, he's been a great supporter. I love him, but I can tell you one thing: the judge know he can talk, and don't let him throw the books at you. I love the judge. I love you all. Thank you so much. We'll see you the next time. But until then, don't forget your mask. Stay safe when you're out there. Keep the you to live. I want you to live. It's gone. You're out in the public. I had it before. I don't want any of you all to have to get it if you have not had it. We've lost so many people that we love. God bless you. Stay safe until we meet again.
Yes.
Bye-bye. Norn, I seen that baby of yours, that brown chocolate baby. I love her. Bye-bye.